This morning that you and I were charged with a crime, but a very unique crime. And the charge was that we did not love God. What type of evidence would we provide to show our defense of such a crime? I would suspect that our mind would first and foremost go to the number of times we've gone to Mass, the times that we remember to pray at home. In addition, we might think of those moments that we're kind and loving to our family members and to our friends. And of course, as a priest, I would be remiss if I didn't say we show our love for God when we contribute to our parish. But imagine this. Dorothy Day said that all of those expressions of our faith pale in comparison to this. Dorothy Day said that we love God as much as we love the person we love least. We love God as much as the love that we have for the person we love least. That's really hard to understand and perhaps even more challenging to live out. But let's first talk about exactly what type of love Jesus is speaking of in today's gospel. The Jews of Jesus' day did not understand what this love meant, and so they made exceptions to this rule of love. They said, well, if you're a pagan, you don't have to love them. If the person is a Samaritan, ignore them. If the person is a tax collector, not only don't love them, but you can hate them. But not so with Jesus. Jesus makes no distinction. It is not just love our family members and friends. Don't just simply love those who agree with us or worship as we do. But instead, Jesus said, we must love everyone as ourselves. So what exactly does this love mean? I think what is essential to realize that the love that Jesus speaks of is not a love that's based on emotion. When we think of the love that we might have for a friend, that grows and develops because we enjoy his or her personality. They make us feel good when they're in their presence, and we begin to love our friends. For those of you who are married, in that romantic love, it is an attraction to one another. Again, based in emotion. But the love that Jesus calls us to in today's gospel is not based on emotion, but rather is based on intentionality. What the Lord is saying that as we reflect on the fact that God freely loves us, intentionally loves us, despite our shortcomings, in turn, you and I have to be intentional in loving God, but in particular in today's gospel, he challenges us that we also must love our neighbor. And again, it's not based on emotion that we love people that we like. Jesus is speaking it directly of the folks that we don't like, the people that we disagree with, or perhaps have harmed us in a particular way. And Jesus said we must be intentional in loving them, to will what is good for them with no exception. Now, it's easy for me to stand behind this pulpit today and speak with great clarity of what Jesus is saying. But make no mistake that when I leave this pulpit, I find it very challenging to embody the words of Jesus. Love God most days. Love my family and friends, again, most days. But love people that I don't like, that's where it's the challenge. And so, brothers and sisters, that's why you and I need to be here. Because the Lord doesn't just give us a challenge to love, but he gives us all the strength that we need here at Mass. And that's why we need to be here week after week, not simply when it coordinates with our vacation plans, not just when the Ravens aren't playing on Sunday, but every week we need to be here. It's not enough to pray at home. Yes, it's important to pray at home, and we should stay at home if we're sick. But if we're not sick, we need to be here to receive graces that we can't get at home. Our church teaches us that when the Word of God is proclaimed, we hear the voice of Jesus. It's not just simply reading from a book in history, but our church teaches us that when we gather as we are today and the Word of God is proclaimed, the voice of God is reaching to you and to me. A voice that loves us, that supports us, encourages us, and yes, even challenges us. But in addition to this, soon we gather around God's altar, not to receive a sign or a symbol, but the very strength of Jesus, his true body and blood, that strength for us to go out into the world to love God and to love our neighbor. I find it ironic that sometimes when I encounter people, whether at the gym or the mall, and they know that I'm a priest, some will engage me in a conversation as to why they don't want to go to Mass. And most commonly, they'll talk about that, I don't go to Mass because everyone that goes, they're hypocrites. They go in and they listen to the Word of God and they receive the Eucharist, but they talk about others, and they're not always kind, and sometimes they're a bit vengeful. And what I want to say, and I don't, but that's the reason that we're here. Mass is not some award ceremony where we pat each other on the back to say, you're holy, no, you're holier. But instead, the very fact that we're here shows that we're sinners. That I guess, although this is impossible, but I guess if we were able to master these commandments, to love God with our whole heart, mind, and soul, and our neighbor as ourselves, then I guess in that instance, maybe we wouldn't need to come here. But since the beginning of humanity, no one has been able to live out those commandments perfectly. And that's why we need to be here. And we look to one another again, not to pat each other on the back, but to recognize that we're fellow sinners, and that the reality that we're here means that we need help. We need to be inspired, we need to be reminded, and most importantly, we need to be fed, so that as we go out into an ever-confusing world that seems to now rejoice more over division than unity, to celebrate when a person makes a mistake rather than when they accomplish something, you and I as Catholic Christians cannot succumb to the pressures of society, but we must go out into the world to be the voice of Jesus, to love without condition. And so, brothers and sisters, I guess it's a long way of saying this, that if you and I were charged with whether we love God, I guess the answer is the jury is out. And the jury remains out until that last day that we face and we meet our Maker. But until that day, as we seek to be found not guilty of not loving God, that we want to love the Lord with our whole heart, our whole mind, and our whole soul, let us remember those challenging words of Dorothy Day. We only love God as much as we love the person we love least.